Hello and welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. Republicans and Democrats alike tell the American people that they have a stark choice before them in this election year. Is it really the case? Does America's two-party system monopolize national politics and crowd out real discussion of political issues? And does it really matter who is elected president in November? To crosstalk the U.S. political system, I'm joined by Nicholas Caroll in Sacramento. He's a journalist and author of Walk Away from Debt for a Better Future. In Washington, we have Bruce Fein. He is the founder of the Lickfield Group and American Freedom Agenda. And in Frankfurt, we cross to Christoph von Marschall. He is the U.S. Bureau Chief for Der Tagesspiegel. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. Nicholas in Sacramento, you got up earliest for the program, so I'm going to go to you first, okay? I live abroad. I've lived abroad for a long time, and I've had to explain American politics to foreigners for over 2 decades. It looks like American politics is trivial, and it's about character, and it's not about substance. The last debate told us that, the last presidential debate. How much substance is there in this election cycle, or any election cycle these days in the U.S.?
I'm having trouble saying because I have trouble staying awake for more than 10 minutes of any one debate. I'd say not much substance at all. If we had Jill Stein in there, that might be a different matter.
Okay, well, I mean, how do you account for that? I mean, why is it that way?
Well, there's not much to be discussed. Romney is trying to find a position that will satisfy the middle. Obama has his hands tied to a large extent by having inherited the Bush War and the Bush recession. He's also the first African-American president, which puts him sort of in a position that JFK was back in 1960, the first Irish-American president. It's not talked about, but it is an issue. So he can't go on the offensive like Romney can.
Okay, Bruce, what do you think about that?
Kick Romney's teeth in.
Well, I think that it's the reason why there's such an overlap between the Democrats and Republicans is in part because the electoral system fences out new ideas. I was a senior policy advisor to Ron Paul, who was received with great enthusiasm by veterans and with a substantial portion of the Republican base, even though it challenged the idea of Bush-Cheney empire, the assertion of executive prerogative to initiate war, to detain without accusation or trial, to place people on predator drone assassination lists without any outside review. And he was told at the Republican convention he couldn't speak unless he agreed to support Romney, and he had his speech censored by the Romney people. And you have a very, very great difficulty, given electoral rules, to get on the ballot if you're not a Republican or Democrat. So you have this built-in headwind. But also, another explanation is we've moved from a republic that celebrated a free speech and individual liberty to one where there's a general consensus across the board of this idea of empire. So Bush and Cheney and Obama and Romney are basically singing the same libretto with regard to our need to lead the world. Who will lead it if we, with our great angelic attitude, doesn't do so? So we think about intervening in Syria, and we intervene in Libya, and we got troops and CIA in Uganda, and we're fighting wars in Afghanistan, bleeding over to Pakistan, and we're in Yemen and all these places. And this is at a staggering cost, which is causing the budget deficit. We have a national security budget of about $1.2 trillion.
Bruce, okay, I mean, you're taking over the entire program and mentioning everything I want to mention. So let me go to Christoph first. So everything's constructed. Consensus is already constructed before people vote. This is essentially what Bruce is saying.
No, I totally disagree with Bruce and with Nicholas. I think there's a huge choice, a huge difference in the outcome of this election. If Romney wins, if the Republicans win the White House, they will also probably keep the majority in the House and win the majority in the Senate. And if the Republicans control all the important political positions, the White House, the Senate, and the House, then you will see a huge difference. America has a huge debt, more than $16 billion. That is more than 100% of GDP. And the next 4 years will be about who pays for that. And I can tell you, it will be a huge difference whether Obama controls the White House or Mitt Romney controls the White House. At the moment in the debates, you can't see that because both of them are timid to articulate what they want to do. At the moment, you don't see it in the debate, but if you follow how Republicans think and how Democrats think, and that is a huge ideological difference. I'm coming from Germany, a country where most political parties agree. They are all social democratic parties. In the States, in the United States, where I live already for almost 8 years, you have a huge fight at every election, whether you want to have less state, less taxes, or if you think the government is also responsible for the poorer ones and that you have to subsidize poorer people that they have a chance to study and so on. So it is a huge difference.
Go ahead, jump in, Bruce.
Well, I think that misses the point. The fact is that you have an ideological debate to some degree during the campaign, but when it comes to actual governing, it's the same old story. Obama said lots of things during his campaign, and then he renounced virtually all of them when he became president. And that's what you can expect with Mitt Romney. Romney's got 5 positions on every single issue that he's jumped forward and back. And with regard to the youth vote, it's historically true. Very, very tiny turnout with that youth vote there. They haven't got the income yet to worry about the taxes. To them, the national debt, 16, 17 trillion, is just a number. And if you look at the so-called differences between the two, even if you take the most austere budget of Paul Ryan, that's viewed as the most radical, it still doesn't lead to a balanced budget till about 2040. And it's the difference between his budget and Obama's is a difference between a 25 trillion deficit, national debt in 2020 as opposed to 23 trillion, which is trivial with regard to the impact on the economy and the drying up of the funds for investment and otherwise. And if you talk about what are the things that Romney's going to do that's going to be repeal Mr. Obama's programs there, he said nothing about immigration with regard to the amnesty. With regard to the Health Care Act, he said, well, I got to keep on 26 years old. You have existing conditions will continue on for those who already have insurance. All these things just indicate he's moving around at the margins. And if you talk about even when you have a president controlled the Congress, Obama had a Democratic Congress in his first 2 years, and his program looked just like Bush and Cheney.
Let me go back to Nicholas. Over the last 4 years, the 1%, the so-called 1%, have done pretty well. The rest of them haven't. So what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat right now? Wall Street recovered.
Well, that goes right to the core. The core issue is that Americans they're pleased to see this now as a situation where we have a democracy that is not working well, where the reality is that we have a plutocratically controlled republic that is working very well indeed. And the question is whether Obama in his second term will make a shift and tax the rich. This is the basic issue, whether we are going to allow plutocracy to concentrate to 38% of the wealth with the 1%.
Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, what's so staggering about that?
Bruce, here you see the difference. If Romney is elected, he will cut taxes.
We've heard promises before. Bruce, go ahead. Jump in. We've heard promises before.
We have Obama who's raising $1 billion, and this, he runs these fundraisers, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 for dinner. He's going out every day getting money from fat cats. $1 billion, the most expensive campaign ever. $193 million in the last month alone, and he's not going to be in the hands of the plutocrats. It's just people who want them to fund, the green technologies as opposed to bailing out the banks. But it's still the money that calls the tune. And when you go up on Capitol Hill, despite the statement that, well, there really is a huge ideological difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, it's not there. I'm in Washington every single day. I'm up in Congress 2 or 3 times a week. And sure, sometimes the public statements are different, but when it comes to votes, nope. They're all in favor of the government growing bigger and bigger and bigger. None of them want to ever abolish any particular program. And what they do is they fund everybody's goodies by borrowing more money and throwing all of this debt, 16, 17, $20 trillion on posterity that doesn't have a vote. And it's the same script. You talk about right now, the so-called fiscal cliff, they're plotting right now to kick the ball down the road. They'll do a continuing resolution. They'll delay it for 6 months or whatever, and somebody will pick up the tab. Bruce, you always come on
with passion here. Christoph, go ahead, jump in. Why will it be different if Obama's reelected? Why?
Well, Obama used his majority, of which Bruce was talking, for the first years. Obama did big things for American politics. He did the stimulus program, he did the healthcare reform, he did the financial market reform, he did Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That means how you treat homosexuals in the military. He had a disarmament contract with Russia about the nuclear missiles, and he had 2 new Supreme Court judges. So if you think that is nothing, and it just means that America goes the same way as if a Republican would be in the White House, I would just say you are not watching politics in the United States. Of course, in the second half of his presidency, he couldn't continue because the Republicans had the majority in Congress, at least in the House. And so it makes a huge difference. You will see. Ask people who earn less than $50,000 a year as household money. It makes for them a huge difference whether the Republicans, Ryan and Romney, will slash all those programs or whether in some way they will continue. I agree with you, Bruce, that both parties have no good plan how to cut the deficit. That is a big problem. But when you come to the question, what are they willing to do to cut the deficit? Then for the Republicans, it's even worse. They want to slash taxes for the rich, and Obama and the Democrats want to raise taxes for the people who can really afford to pay a little bit more.
Okay, Nicholas, I'm going to give you the last word before we go. Hang on, Nicholas, before we go to the break. Go ahead, jump in.
Well, the fact is we don't know what Obama will do in a second term. In the first term, he's been constrained to a large extent by getting elected in a second term. And the other one people overlook is they see Obama as a standard mainstream American. He grew up in Hawaii in a very different culture. We don't know what Barack Obama really thinks. And it's quite possible that he's a populist under the skin.
Okay, gentlemen, we have to go to a short break. And after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the U.S. political system. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about the U.S. political system. Okay, Bruce, I'd like to go back to you. I mean, why isn't in this campaign and other presidential campaigns, the Americans, and particularly in this year, don't talk about Obama's use of drones, incarceration, poverty levels? A lot of these are really serious problems in the United States, and I don't see people debating it at a high level, okay? Why is that? Why is that shut out of political discussion? And everyone's talking about Big Bird.
Yeah, well, I think that's the frightening thing, that these major issues of the rule of law and constitutionality, the president being able to put American citizens on assassination lists, detentions and indefinitely at Guantanamo without accusation or trial. He's got secret interpretations of the Patriot Act that enable him to sweep up all of our emails, of all of our phone conversations, keep dossiers without any probable cause, use surveillance drones, and there's virtually no discussion, as you talk about a fair playing field, that are not the 1%, that don't get all the government bailouts, whether it's the green technologies that got huge monies to go bankrupt building solar panels, or the big banks that got huge staggering billions of dollars for irresponsibly, lending money through fraud on mortgages and whatever. And this is where it's frightening, because there's consensus between the Republicans and the Democrats. Nothing happens. And when you have an issue that it doesn't even make the mainstream debate, that's the time to worry that you're headed towards self-ruination.
Okay, Nicholas, what do you think about that? Because I just mentioned some really major issues affecting, a good deal of the population, maybe not the 1%, but the presidential candidates don't debate it, okay? Why is there some kind of censure not to talk about it, a consensus not to talk about these issues? Nicholas in Sacramento, go ahead.
Well, one is just in mainstream journalism, having been a stringer and knowing a lot of journalists, is there's so much bad news in elections that right now and this year, journalists just can't stop writing bad economic news. They're tired of bad news. But I did notice on Google Trends that the term the Great Recession has dropped at the beginning of this year, just dropped out of mainstream media. So we have this fiction now that the Great Recession is over and we're in recovery. I live in the San Joaquin Valley, where the Great Recession is going just fine, and we're not worried about a double dip, because the first dip is going strong. So right here, the water fountains are closed, the public bathrooms are closed, the economy is tanked. and it's staying that way. And the question really coming up in the second term is, are we going to pull the money out of the rich people's pockets and build the infrastructure?
Nicholas, I'm glad
again?
you brought up money. Christoph, I can go back to you in Frankfurt. I mean, another kind of taboo topic is campaign finance, okay, where you get your money, okay? And since 2010, you don't have to say. I mean, that's even more corrupting of the political system, okay? I'm a child of Watergate. I remember campaign finance was really important, you know, and rules, and now they're all gone, okay? So again, it goes back to the 1%, and the 1% support Romney and Obama.
Well, I don't agree. It is true that the American system of financing campaigns is totally strange for us in Western Europe, as it is strange for Russians as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Far too big money is involved, and I think also if there's too much money involved, it is corrupting politics in a certain way. But it is not true that these are taboo subjects. It's all the time is written about it, it's talked about in TV.
Are the presidential candidates discussing it? Are they discussing it? No, they're not.
Yeah, okay. Are they the only voices? Are they the only voices which are heard? I happen to live in the United States, and I can tell you that people are not all the time only paying attention what the two candidates say. There's a much broader debate in the United States, in TV channels, in newspapers, and almost every day you can have articles in the newspapers.
And what impact does it have when the political parties agree that they like the status quo with campaign financing? It stays that way. It doesn't matter what the public says. It doesn't matter what the public says.
Yeah, but you're not right. I mean, of course you can say that they all agree. They don't agree. The Democrats don't like the new law that you don't have to tell if you're a political organization where you get your money from.
They still take the money, and they don't tell anybody where they got it from. Bruce, go ahead.
There's a huge difference how both. There's a huge difference how the two campaigns are financed.
The issue of campaign finance has been complicated by a decision of the United States Supreme Court called Citizens United, which held that there's a First Amendment right for corporations, labor unions to spend unlimited amounts of money as long as they don't coordinate it with a particular candidate. The coordination is really a joke because they have people who've worked with a candidate for 50 years. They know exactly what the candidate once said and then runs these so-called independent expenditure groups and spends 20, 30, 50, $100 million. And it can be an individual like Sheldon Adelson who's put in 20, 30 million to Romney's campaign. The Democrats are to stop from complaining about it because they go get money from the George Soroses and super rich in Hollywood. And of course the media in some sense enjoys it because where's that money spent? On advertising. The TV advertising, you know, rates, and they make huge amounts of money off of carrying these ads. But I want to go back to, I think, to the central point you made, these critical issues not being debated. The most important one to me is the president's claim of unilateral authority to go to war, whether it's in Libya or a future in Iran and Yemen. And the last time there was a serious debate, a presidential campaign in 1920 turned on League of Nations in the United States. And that was an issue over whether the president Wilson was going to, through the League of Nations, being able to unilaterally commit the United States to go to war without congressional authorization. And when we think these wars cost trillions of dollars, brave men and women dying, and at a time when we're running these huge deficits, we're spending still $350 million a day in Afghanistan, bombing rocks, you know, with our soldiers there at $1 million cost of it, one troop spending there. And with this issue not being debated, that because only Congress can authorize it, we're doomed to financial bankruptcy because we can't sustain, you know, permanent war, global war everywhere, aside from the fact that it encroaches on our liberty at home. But that's the big issue. The president gets to go to war whenever he feels like it. Well, and the founding fathers in the Constitution said no.
If I go to Nicholas, it seems to me that, you know, Obama or the president of the United States can go to a war against any individual he or she wants now with impunity. And I think the Republicans don't seem to have a problem with that, and they don't seem to have a problem with that at all. I'm talking about drones.
Well, Congress rolled over as far as letting presidents declare war a long time before Obama came along.
Go ahead, Bruce.
No, I understand. It's not. It's certainly not. It didn't first appear on Obama's watch. That's for sure. Harry Truman
now it's very consistent. It's consistent now under his watch. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's been institutionalized and forged into what you would call an executive power doctrine, even though it's counter-constitutional. And the whole reason why is that our founding as a nation over 200 years ago, we debated about half of the time on the Constitution as ensuring only Congress could get us into war, because the executive branch had a tendency to magnify danger, because at wartime they get all the power, the taxes, the money, the contracts, the footprints in the sand of time, you know, being number one around the world. And now we've moved and turn that concept on its head. And I can guarantee no matter who is in the presidency, Republican or Democrat, Obama or Romney, they will go to war, because that's their idea of what it means to be the most powerful nation on the world. And now not only declare war against individuals, but even U.S. citizens are now subject to being declared as objects or subjects of war, even when they haven't committed treason.
Okay, Christoph, you're disagreeing. Go ahead, jump
Actually,
in.
There is discussion.
Yeah, totally disagreeing. America is not at all eager at the moment to go to war, because they have had 2 wars for many years in Afghanistan and Iraq. The people are tired of doing it, and the presidential candidates know that they are tired of doing it. That was the reason why, for example, in Libya, they didn't want to commit more than a few airstrikes from above. There will be no war on Iran. There will nobody intervene in Syria, because America is tired of it. So, Bruce, you can talk at all the time how belligerent they are. In reality, they are not, because they want to win not only this election, also the next election, and 2/3 of the American population is against going to another war. So it will not happen.
Okay.
No, the presidents go to war irrespective of the population.
Okay, Nicholas, go ahead. In Sacramento, jump in. Go ahead.
It's worth. Well, I thought I'd point out that Obama's wars have been relatively cheap. He inherited the Bush War, which is the expensive one. You contrast that with Libya, where the ships were kept offshore and they fired hundreds of Tomahawk missiles. We know what the bill was. Somewhere, you know, okay, it cost $1 billion, $1 billion here and $1 billion there, but it was a very much cheaper war than Afghanistan or Iraq was. So Obama's, the wars he started have been cheap ones, which is consistent with what Clinton did. Clinton had short, cheap wars.
Okay, go ahead, jump in.
But that overlooks the fact that the staggering amounts are keeping, you know, virtually hundreds, if not 1,000 military bases abroad, having a huge, you know, weapons program where we're building ships at $12 billion for aircraft carriers that we don't need, aircraft that cost $500 million a copy. It's not just the fighting of the war, it's preparing to fight a war everywhere in the world. And now we're so-called pivoting towards Asia. So now China is the next bugbear.
Okay, all right, we're almost out of time, gentlemen. I want to move to some more new ground here. Christoph, I mean, being a German but living in the United States, what do you think of America's cultural wars that galvanizes the grassroots? Okay, I think there's a number of Republicans have made some obvious gaffes about a number of things, from abortion to legal rape, etc., etc. I mean, that does work in America, unfortunately.
It is fascinating for a European to watch that. It is a little bit beyond our what we can really understand. But, you know, the interesting thing is people who exaggerate their ideological wars get punished by the voters. You can see that in the Senate races in Missouri. There you had a Republican senator candidate who was talking about legal how it could be legal to force a woman to sexual activities, and even when she gets pregnant that she would not be allowed to have an abortion. So there was an uproar in the United States. You could see in all the polls how female voters were heading to the Democrats. So yes, there are some strange people who try to force strange subjects in the campaign, but when they do so, they get punished. And I can tell you that the Republican Mitt Romney, who wants to keep the campaign only about the economy, about the unemployment rate and this stuff, he is angry when fellow Republicans are trying to start these
but a lot of the hardcore love their ideological ones.
Bruce,
let me jump to you. I'm going to give you the last word on the program. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Republicans and the hardcore make these social issues a campaign matter, but when they get in governing, they just walk away from them. I know my experience in the Reagan administration, he didn't do anything with regard to Roe versus Wade.
Okay, Bruce and gentlemen, thank you very much for a
school.
riveting debate. Many thanks to my guests today in Sacramento, Washington, and in Frankfurt, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, Crosstalk rules.